Hey, everybody. This is Heather Alderman, Executive Director of COSMA. I'm here today to talk about what preparation you would take to become a COSMA site reviewer. This training can help you if you're hosting a site visit. It can help you if you're preparing a self-study document. It can just generally help you understand what's happening, what to expect when you do have a site visit. So if you are planning to be a site reviewer, then there are just a few elements that you sort of have to memorize or be on board with. And then the rest of it, of course, will be based on the circumstances of the particular institution and program that you're visiting. So if you don't already know this, you would need to understand the general approach that the COSMA accreditation process takes, which is to be outcomes-based and mission-driven. So that means each site is different. Each institution has its own mission, and each program, therefore, has its own mission and philosophy. And so the comparison that you're making is based on that. It is not based on some external arbitrary standard. And of course, it's outcomes driven, meaning that the program has established some student learning outcomes and some operational effectiveness goals. And we want to know what they think about the data collection based on those things and what it means to them, and then what kinds of changes that might drive. So that's the cornerstone of this model. We also expect that programs will continuously improve. So when you are going for a first-time site visit, there may be a different sort of set of criteria that you're basing your decision on. But when a program has been accredited for 7 years and is going through reaffirmation of accreditation, the type and level at which you are scrutinizing the program is going to shift a little bit into more nitty-gritty details. In general, this is a very flexible process, so we try to understand circumstances within an institution's situation and within the greater context of higher education in this country. One really important concept is that you should, by this time that you're going to go host or go be on a site visit, should know which programs are included in the site visit. In general, it's very straightforward that the academic unit has one or more programs, like a bachelor's degree in sport management or a master's degree in sport management. Sometimes they have a master's degree, let's say, but they're developing a bachelor's degree, or the reverse. Or there may be something that is not quite under their operational control that has the word sport in it, and maybe sports psychology, let's say. And it should have been determined that that program is not a sport management program. If the case is that actually you discover new programs that you hadn't heard of, you would talk about that before you go on the site visit. So generally, all of that work has been done. Sometimes these things kind of crop up and we have to deal with them. Nothing terrible is going to happen, but that is just an important element of this process, that we know what's going to be accredited and what is either being excluded, or there just really is nothing else to look at, and it's all very, very clear. You are not making accreditation decisions, but you should know that the Board of Commissioners does that, and they make accreditation decisions with required elements to respond to, which are called notes, and ones that are recommended to respond to, which are called observations. So you should know this as a part of how you're able to not only approach your own work, but also describe the process to the people that you are visiting. You should also understand what steps the program has taken to get to the site visit. That may be because you're from an accredited program, or you're going through the process and you understand that this program is in candidacy status, or that they have already been accredited and that they are reaffirming. Certainly, there is quite a bit of time commitment and responsibilities involved in a site visit. We do a lot of preparation by reading the self-study and by talking with the teammate, and you'll talk to me, of course, to give your general first impressions. And then, of course, the actual time you'll spend on site is the commitment. And then in the writing of the report that follows. And so I'll be talking in detail about all of those things. We have also implemented some observers. Sometimes it's possible for, say, a commissioner to actually come to the site visit and be there to observe. That's a bit rare. But generally, I try to come to meetings that you might have with a provost or president or upper administrator, and also with the exit interview, which I'll talk about, of course. And that is for me to just be there to speak to those process issues. And frankly, I'm there to watch the team and make sure that what they're saying and how they're approaching their discussion with the program is appropriate and consistent across all of our site visits. And then, of course, as a site reviewer, you will always have at least one other team member. Generally, the visits don't necessarily expand beyond that in terms of size. It does depend on the program itself and how big it is or how many locations they have. And you're going to work together with that person. And we'll talk quite a bit about that coming up. Something that we always check for before a site team is established and before, of course, they go out on the site visit is if there are any conflicts of interest. So certainly that happens in your own mind when you're looking at lists of site visits that are coming up and dates and the program and whether or not you have some sort of conflict of interest with the program. So the other side of that would be that when I've been able to establish a team, I send those names and their affiliations to the team hosting, and they also will check with their faculty to ensure that there is not a conflict of interest. So, of course, what is a conflict of interest? Well, it of course covers many things, and you can see in the numbered items on this slide what those might be. Sometimes it's that you've worked there recently, or that you have gone you have a business relationship with someone in that program or a current business relationship. If you have any sort of known or expressed bias, you certainly can't be employed by that program. Sometimes, sport management, while big, it also can be a little bit small, and you may have met somebody at a conference, or you may have talked with them. You may have even in grad school written a paper with somebody. We will determine on a case-by-case basis whether this really constitutes a conflict of interest or not, but we definitely want to avoid the appearance of them and actual conflicts. We want to avoid that. So if there's any concern, I just move on to another person. Okay, when planning a site visit, you're going to be traveling to a location. So there are a couple of ways that these logistics might be handled. That may be through me, if the program has paid a flat fee and will have COSMA organize the whole thing for them. If they plan to organize the site visit, then they will be directly arranging with you your travel. They will tell you where your hotel is. They will take care of your meals or reimburse you for meals they cannot directly pay for. So all of that is a part of this process, even if it's not as exciting as, reading the self-study and doing interviews on site. Getting there safely and knowing where you are supposed to be and when is very important. In general, as I mentioned, you're going to be dividing responsibilities with your team member. And if it's your first time on a site visit, talk about what you're comfortable doing or not doing. You're really going to look to that seasoned chair of your site visit for direction and for guidance and for assistance and mentorship. And that's expected. We have to certainly start somewhere with an initial visit, but dividing those responsibilities, of course, will help everybody, and it will get you a really good sense of the aspects that you write up, as to how to introduce them. We have a difference between what you're going to talk about privately with your team member and then how you present information to the site that you're visiting. So it is a little bit of a private discussion versus a public face situation. Your role is somewhat one of diplomacy, and it is not, of course, to be very harsh about what you might be seeing or not seeing at the program. There are many ways that I think work effectively to help programs stretch into new areas or to do better in areas, but certainly criticism straight up is probably not the best way to do that. In addition, the time and effort that it takes to go through this should be valued. And it's certainly very important to ensure that the program knows what they're doing well, and that is the central focus. I will have a slide where I discuss writing the report, but that in itself there's a template and it has specific sections. And while I do not know exactly what you're going to write in that report, I certainly have a sense of the standard of which the level of detail is that needs to be there, because this is a public facing document and a document that is sent to the higher administrators in an institution. So we definitely don't want typos and bad grammar, but we want good, clear, and useful information. Also, I should have mentioned this a little bit earlier. There is somebody that will always be your contact on campus, and we call that person the campus coordinator. Generally, it's the person who wrote the self-study or who is in charge of this process. It might be an administrative assistant. It might be a student. It could be the department chair. You don't know, but you'll just have one contact person. So if there are any issues with travel or any issues or just to talk about when to do things, you will have a contact person on site. So there is a manual, of course, that talks about all of these things, the site visit preparation manual. And in that manual, and also the programs that are hosting the site visit receive a template, an example schedule, and it gives general timeframes and the types of people that will be interviewed when you're there. So of course, you as the site reviewer will also receive a site visit schedule. Generally, it will get to you a couple of weeks before you actually go out on the site visit. By this time, you've been pretty thorough with your review of the self-study document. So you will know that the people that are listed, and it may be just shown by groups of people, like students' names won't be there, but groups of students will be on there, or an advisory board, let's say. And you will know whether or not all of those stakeholders are represented on that list. So if you see something that's not there, you might ask that you talk to one of those individuals. And we're, again, pretty flexible. Like I said, it would be very helpful to talk with some stakeholders, such as an advisory board, if the program has one. So in order to do that, it might mean that you would have to speak with them, through Zoom or some other platform. And that is okay. We certainly pivoted quite a bit during the pandemic, and those pivots can remain so that people can participate. And this may be very useful and helpful for meetings with students as well. So I leave that discretion up to the site, the actual site itself. And as the site visit team, know that you will be given access to whatever means by which you're going to be conducting the interviews. In general, the whole site visit kind of centers around the schedule of the president or the provost, because they have the most limited time. So then the schedule is generally built around them. And often that visit is going to be fairly early on. And you will be interviewing them in a very general way, not asking them nitty-gritty details about the program. You also will be discussing the program, the likes and dislikes of the students from a cross-section of all of the different degree levels and programs that that the site has. If there are multiple degree levels, you'll meet with groups from, say, the doctoral students, the master's students, and the bachelor's degree students. Hopefully you're talking to students who are, as we say, cross-section, that kind of range the demographics of the students, but also what year they are in the program. That can just provide a different perspective. As I said with the report, you really should divide the duties between yourself and your co-visitor. And also, you would want to talk about who's going to lead which interviews. I think that's really helpful. One person can take notes, the other person can lead the interview. You should, of course, pre-write questions, and then you may come up with new ones as you're talking to different people. You will probably repeat questions quite a bit, which is part of this validation of the self-study process. And then, of course, you will be conducting an exit interview, and I'll go into more detail on that shortly. All right, the self-study document review. This, of course, is the meat of your preparation. This document can be hundreds of pages long. Don't worry too much because quite a bit of it is appendices, and those appendices are to be referred to, acting as a reference, and are not necessarily something that you will read word for word. But the bulk of the self-study is the answers to the self-study guideline questions, which are located in the accreditation principles and self-study preparation document. So each of the 7 principles has a number of either sections or self-study guidelines, and you'll be reviewing those responses. Generally, you can use whatever method works best for you to take notes. Some people do print out the documents or are able to take notes in some other way while they're reading the document. You should also go to the program's website. This is kind of a part of that scope of accreditation element I talked about. If you just Google them, you might see things you didn't see in the document, but just see what it looks like. Now, of course, the program may not have any control over how accessible the information is on their website, but that is something that can at least give you information about what does the outward facing look of this program, what does it look like, how is that helpful, and what does it mean for the sort of synergy between what's on the website and then what they're saying that they do or they're talking about in their self-study document. So we will have a lovely, probably an hour-and-a-half phone discussion. It is definitely a lengthy discussion about your comments and thoughts and connections that you're making between the different principles. So you may see that some information to you is missing, or maybe it's you don't understand how one section is talked about in one way and the other section maybe is talked about in a different way. So you may have some questions, but then just in general, you may have some, it may be that you're starting to formulate areas that you're going to focus on when you're on the site visit. And in all transparency, this is good. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And I want the program that's being visited to know what you're going to talk about with them. I want none of this really to be a big surprise or some sort of gotcha moment. That's, of course, not diplomatic and not what we're looking for here. So if you have questions or you're confused about something, it could be that they can literally explain it to you and it makes sense, or send a little bit of extra information and that will make sense. But we'll talk about kind of what maybe we would ask them to handle in a different way. And then we also would just give them a heads up, basically, about what kinds of things you might talk to them about. That said, you will be able to talk to them about many things beyond what we might tell them that we're going to address. So it's not limiting in that way. Okay, this is sort of like moving into the next section of this training, which would be what you will be looking for when you're reading the self-study document, principle by principle. So for principle 1, which is the cornerstone of this accreditation process with outcomes assessment, you are looking at all of those key content areas that are a part of the outcomes assessment plan. The program will have included their whole plan in this document. And that is one thing that you're looking at. So you're looking at their clear and measurable student learning outcomes. You're looking at the direct and indirect measures of student learning that they're using, and you will, try to understand to what degree those are measuring those student learning outcomes. They will also have included their rubrics and the measurement tools so that you can look at those and possibly offer some suggestions for any improvement if there are any. They also will discuss the sort of basic skills element of the program with you, or in this part of the document, and that's going to be somewhat what the institution is providing for students to help them with math and with writing. And then, of course, some personal development, which will be like interview skills and resume writing. And, there may be other personal development skills that a particular program focuses on based on their mission. And then they also have developed some operational effectiveness goals, which are goals for the program at large or writ large, the academic unit, not a specific degree. And they have some measurement tools there. So not only are you looking at the plan, but then you're looking at how what they're getting from this data. So they will have at least collected at least a year's worth of data if they are up for first-time accreditation. So they'll have a year of data that they've analyzed. If it's a reaffirmation, you're getting a snapshot of data, but know that they've been collecting data for quite some time. And so your level of scrutiny, as I had mentioned, would be maybe slightly different and more detail-oriented. And probably the most important part of this, of course, is what the data means to them and what kinds of action plans they may or may not have taken, depending, and what they're going to do to either change the plan or change any sort of curricular activities or anything else as it relates to their student learning outcomes and their operational effectiveness goals. So sometimes this there isn't a lot of change, and that's fine. It depends on what the data is telling them and what it means for them. The integration into budgeting and strategic planning, that is the tie between this principle and the next one, which is strategic planning, but it also is a way to look at the bigger picture, not just this one snapshot of the year. So sometimes the students seem to be achieving well, or the goals are being met in that area, but there may be then in the sort of stretch for continuous development some other goals that they might want to work on strategically to adjust and change the program. So that's how you're going to kind of connect principle 1 with principle 2. So sometimes the person who volunteers to talk about principle 1 might also want to grab principle 2 so that you're kind of able to mush these things together in your report and really make those connections for the program, and for the Board of Commissioners when they're reviewing these materials and understand what's going on. So with strategic planning, they'll have a program level strategic plan, which must contain specific elements. And all of that, of course, is listed in the self-study document. And in addition, they then mostly in their self-study guidelines that you're looking at, they're talking about to what degree this process has been effective for them. I think this is a little bit of a challenging principle, mostly because when administrators change, specifically the president or someone at that kind of a high level, there can be a lot of shifting and adjustment at that institutional level of strategic goals. And that really can mess, of course, with a program level strategic plan. So we are flexible in that we understand these changes are coming and they're going. What we're hoping is that the program is able to flex with any institutional changes and not just not do strategic planning, but of course, to adjust it, to change it, to maybe just make a few different adjustments or continue to collect data on this information or continue with their strategic goals, even while an institutional plan is being adjusted. So the degree to which a program is meeting this principle is a little bit more complicated and maybe variable depending on the circumstances. So other things that will be included in this principle would be how a program is managing succession planning. So, people do stay at the same program or institution, can stay for a long time, but there can be turnover. And if there is especially turnover with individuals who head up this process, that can cause some disruption. Of course, I keep all materials and can provide that to anybody who's new, but if there really hasn't been any discussion about how that sort of changeover is going to occur, on many levels, it could be a little bit more complicated. So in this most recent iteration of the principles document, we have added a question about how, what are the plans? What are the succession plans? So you're going to look at that and you're going to maybe help them think about how to arrange that as it might seem purposeful for their program. And then so as we now have 7 instead of 8 principles, the educational innovation has been scattered amongst all the other principles. So in addition, in this principle, we're asking about the institutional support for innovation. Now, innovation, of course, is going to be contextual and is going to be dependent upon the institution's definition of innovation. And also, there is an external context to this as well, just in what's going on in higher ed, what's going on regionally, more locally for that program. So please do look at all of those contexts when you're evaluating this principle. Okay, this next principle, curriculum, I call this one a little bit more straightforward, even though it does have some interesting components to it. But basically, we're asking, in what way is this program structured? So, what is the format in which material is being given to students? So you're looking at face-to-face programs, you're looking at hybrid programs, online programs, et cetera, asynchronous and synchronous, of course. You're also looking only at the undergraduate level degree programs, the degree to which the sport management core is meeting all the elements of the common professional components areas. And then you're looking to make sure they have at least 20% of that sport management core as a part of the entire number of credit hours for the undergraduate program. And the number for master's degrees is 50%. So at least half of the core elements of the program need to be sport management content. And for doctoral programs, we do not have any requirements. And then we also ask questions about how and when curriculum are reviewed and improved, and what's that process. So you are in those areas probably looking at institutional policies. So it is making sure that they have those policies, and that's generally institutions have that. And then there are a couple components to this curriculum that focus only on master's and doctoral curricula. So in some instances, when you're on site, you will not need, nobody has filled that out. You will not need to look at it because it is not happening. As you can see, I'm not going through all of the self-study guidelines for each one. I'm just giving you a general overview of what you're going to find in the self-study. I wanted to include the common professional component areas here just so that you can see them. Again, this only applies to the bachelor's level, but we do have 4 required areas and then 1 optional area. Something that comes up in a number of site visits is when a program is particularly in a school of business, which many of them are at this point, whether some of those business core classes would count in the CPC areas. And so definitely I approach this on a case-by-case basis, as does the Board of Commissioners. But I would say that what you might want to suggest to a program is that if there are some elements like financing, budgeting, and accounting that may not have to be specific to sport to still be useful and relevant information for students. So that might be a class or classes that you could include in the so-called sport core. But if there are more generic classes, and I mean generic business classes like marketing or something similar to, or communications, that can be a very different thing when you're dealing with sport industry. So having specific sport management content in those areas is definitely needed, not just the generic business courses. So this is where this is not clear cut, but you may advise a program if they haven't to include some classes. You may also advise them to remove some classes. And the point of this isn't so much that that they have to meet certain numbers and then they're out of compliance. This is really for the program. So think about it in terms of their point of view and what's going to help them. So they've gone through all this work to create abbreviated course syllabi to put into a huge table. So what have they gotten out of it? So what I'd much rather you focus on is the degree to which this exercise has been helpful to them. Are they doing what they thought they were doing to the degree to which they thought they were doing it? And what does that mean for them? And, in what areas might they improve, especially, again, for those under reaffirmation of accreditation. Okay, Principle 4 has several different areas, which you can see here. And this principle is looking in general about the qualifications of the faculty, for which we are quite flexible, as you might know, if you are familiar with any other accrediting bodies. We just want to know that people teaching the classes they're teaching are generally qualified to do that. And we also want to know what kind of load they are taking on teaching wise. But we're also talking about their internship supervising requirements, advising requirements and load, and other sort of service committee requirements. And the reason that this is all tied together, of course, is that they're very busy people out there. And they may be too busy in a way that is unhelpful for their program and for their students and for their themselves. And so you might get a sense when you're looking at a program that this program needs some additional resources. They may tell you straight up, we need some additional resources. We would like another faculty line, or we want our loads to be less. So there are, of course, many ways that this might be accomplished. And it must be that there's a balance between the meeting of the principle and then what they might be able to leverage to get to maybe enhance the resources that they need. So this is definitely where there might be a diplomacy aspect to your mission. And you might think that they need a faculty line because you have experience in this area, but they may not be asking for it or think that they need it. So really, you must take your cues from the program. And of course, your main cue is, of course, the principles document itself and what is required for the program to meet the principle. So, whoa a little bit if you're a little gung-ho. Remember what your role is and what your kind of scope of your what you're doing on a site visit, and see what is happening in a program. You may be discovering something that you can talk about with them that's useful to them, or they may be very straightforward, or something in the middle. So just be careful, if you will. Again, for the undergraduate programs only, we are interested in which CPC areas full-time faculty has primary oversight for. And this is related to load, because if there is one full-time faculty member in a program, how does that individual cover all those CPC areas? This could be another leverage point for a program to say, I can't cover everything. I have some areas of expertise, but it's certainly not every single area. So I need assistance. Also, they are going to be talking about the evaluation process that they go through either annually or on another cycle. They will be providing the instrument used or instruments used, and they'll talk about the degree to which that's effective. And then they will be talking about the policies that the institution has toward faculty development. So just as you've likely learned if you are going through this process or have gone through it, that we ask questions and that is the hint and the clue that you need to be doing those things. So you are making sure that the program does have some kind of faculty development program and policies around that. So that's part of your job as well. Excuse me. All right. Principle 5. This is the scholarly and professional activities principle. And we, a few years ago, changed our model just a little bit to better be able to see what the institution is requiring and make those comparisons to what is reported that the different full and part-time faculty have been involved in. So this again goes back to the mission-driven and the kind of flexible approach of this model, and the focus being on the institution and the program that you're visiting, not on everybody else who's out there that has a different way of doing things. So as you can see with some of these questions, you are asking yourself, where am I doing this site visit? What type of institution is this, and what are those requirements? And what is the mission of the program? So sometimes this principle can be have not a lot of feedback for the program, depending on what the individuals are up to. It might be linked to resources if you notice that the faculty do not go to conferences or do not have some sort of interface with other folks in sport management on some level. It could be that the sport management program is housed in a different type of department or college that's maybe not business or not education. And so some of the focus could be different. And of course, again, you want to use the context, but you just want to understand how this relates to resources, maybe also to faculty load. And then you want to know what maybe they might need to improve, or you may be able to give them some feedback that helps them improve. All right, principle 6 is about resources, and I've touched on this, of course, already just in my discussions, and I hope you're noticing that when I talk about one principle, sometimes another principle comes up. And so part of your task is to connect the principles together. Sometimes there seems to be an area of noncompliance in one area and it's related to another. And so not to double up on the program, but you would maybe cite those areas in your report, but you would mention them in both of the principles so that they can start to make those connections that, our faculty load, principle 4, is very high, or, at the maximum allowed by the institution. And so when we go to resources, we notice that there are some aspects here that are not being addressed, and that is, something that you can link together. So also being on site in person, this is where you're going to see some of the resources in action. So we're talking about offices, classrooms, other facilities that the sport management program might use. You're just seeing what the campus looks like, how accessible the classrooms and the faculty offices are to each other, so that the students in the sport management program know where to go and can get there easily to talk to a professor if they happen to want to do that. You'll see their library and learning resources and any other sort of technology related support or resources that they have or claim to have, or hopefully that are accessible by everybody who is enrolled in the degree program. So this is a little bit more of a hands-on or eyes-on principle, and it is both straightforward and, of course, has its complexity. But you're validating that what they've put in their self-study is what you're seeing and what you're noticing when you're there. The most recent common citations in this principle have been related to some of the research databases that could be used by faculty and students to write papers and to do research. And so any knowledge you have about what databases everybody should have access to can really help you if you need to mention those to a program that doesn't have access to them. And then the last principle is internal and external relationships. So this principle really covers a lot. Internal relationships refer to any sort of any relationship that they have with another department, with athletics, if there is an athletics department, with the study abroad office, with some other program where maybe they put on an event together. So it may be something that they either take for granted and may not see is a cool new thing that you want to emphasize, or maybe they've got a relationship that is maybe in need of some repair, or isn't going so well. And it doesn't mean that they have to bond with any other particular unit on the campus, but you want to see that they are utilizing some of the resources that they have locally. So maybe your point of view as an outsider can help them to reach out and gain resources that they could share with something else, or just to validate that what they're doing has merit and is interesting and is helpful to students. And of course, students will very, candidly talk about anything that you ask them. So you can ask them about this kind of thing as well. You are also looking at their admissions processes. And in general, this is to ensure that students going through the programs have a reasonable chance of success. And I say this is a little bit more important at the graduate level, or not important, but more differently important, let's say, than the graduate level. I know that the program does not control these processes, but how it happens and what kinds of students they get, and that they're then, of course, measuring SLOs for, that's going to make a difference in what they're able to do and what goals they set. If the program has an internship, which 99% do, you're going to be looking at that and the sort of handbook / rules / structure of the internship. And we ask a lot of very specific questions about how it's structured, because those are based on better practices in internship design. And that will be, you may choose to use some of your own experiences to guide what kinds of questions you might ask around their internships. A somewhat recent question for a program that was accredited was they had an internship manual, and then they got rid of it because nobody read it, which I think we all understand. But then there was no place where all of the rules and regulations, which can protect the students and protect the institution, there was really no place where that was written down. So we encourage them to revisit that, and certainly they could make it accessible in a way that maybe it would be read. But they did create a manual again for various reasons to ensure that they were following this principle. So different programs may have all kinds of cooperative relationships locally, maybe with high schools that have sport management classes, certainly community colleges where they may receive transfers, or other local institutions where transfers are going back and forth. Maybe they have a relationship with an institution in another country, and sort of a degree program that some of the time is spent there. So you'll just be validating what they've included in their self-study related to this. We have a couple of sections on this principle related to international sport, and then of course to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'll just say at this time, we would not force an institution to have anything with words in it that they would then be disallowed to have, or that would go against any state law. So we will be kind of following this DEI discussion as it changes over time. I mean, I am following that. Nothing has changed in our principles at this time, and we will just have to see how this plays out. But just know that if you're during this sort of period of uncertainty, if you are going to an institution where this language is no longer used, certainly we'll just have to put it into the new context that exists and not put anyone's job in jeopardy. So please talk to me at any time if that's a question. Both of these areas are also common professional component areas. So this is where this element of Principle 7 links back to Principle 3.2. So, having an international program is not something that every program or every sport management academic unit can have. It's also not required, but certainly acknowledging that sport exists in a global context is what we're looking for. So how that's done is up to the program. You may have a lot of insights and suggestions if that area does need to be improved. So you can always include those kinds of recommendations. And then, of course, for a program that has been accredited already, that should be stated on the program's website. And so you'll be checking it for all the other reasons I've cited, but also to ensure that they still have that there and that it indicates which programs are accredited and that they should have the COSMA seal. Okay, so that's a big flyby of what you're really going on site to look at, which of course is the accreditation principles. However, I just encourage you, of course, you will be reading those if you haven't already because you've written a self-study. But that's the part where I can tell you about it, but you really have to look at it. You have to look at people's responses. You have to think about the responses you've made if you've written a self-study, and that's going to help you evaluate the degree to which programs are in compliance with the principles. So no, you do not have any decision-making power. You are evaluating the degree to which the program has stated accurately what's in their self-study and what's happening on site. And you are providing a lot of context, you're providing a lot of details, you're commending the program, you are saying what areas they might have need in, but you will not be expressing any opinions as to whether they should be accredited. That's what the Board of Commissioners does. And that's where you can always point someone to talk to me if they are trying to really press you to say something. And certainly if you're at a program and boy, everything sure looks good, that's great. Just don't say anything about what you think is going to happen. Okay. There's lots of other things to cover. And some of this I've talked about a little bit, but so a lot of people ask questions about, well, how do I don't know what questions to ask the president or the provost, what am I supposed to do? Well, in the site visit preparation manual is a small guide that gives some seed questions, some questions that you can always draw from that are relatively general, but might get the conversation going. And of course, this is where you and your partner can talk together and decide who wants to lead what and what areas you're most comfortable doing alone or in combination with your teammate. And it really can be just a great team effort. And so certainly, let's say someone is leading an interview, the other person, of course, could chime in with a question. But just know, like I said before, you should come up with questions in advance. You can write them down and look at them while you're asking them. That is completely okay. And you also may ask the same questions over and over of all of the different stakeholders. We do want you to both dress and behave professionally. I definitely am not going to tell you what clothing to wear, but think about what you would wear if you were making a presentation within the context of your institution to, say, the president or the provost, and wear that on the site visit. So you are representing COSMA, and I do want you to do that professionally. And also just to behave both friendly, but also professionally, not only with those individuals you are interviewing, but also with your fellow teammate as you're going on the visit. We have a code of conduct that I'm not really showing you here on the slideshow, but it is a set of norms by which we want you to read, and then we want you to sign it. So before you go out on a visit, you would be reviewing that code of conduct and just indicating that you have read it and you acknowledge that. At times while I've been talking about interpretation of the principles, I've mentioned using your own experience. Of course, that's what we do as human beings. That's the context within which we are evaluating our world. So you are doing that, and I want you to acknowledge that, but also to have an internal dialogue about what that looks like, and have a different external dialogue about how you might ask a program about it or what you might talk to them about. You might use a personal example to create context, or you can use that inside your head as a way to ask a question about how they're doing something or why they're doing something. So, there's a point at which if you feel like you're talking a lot, you might want to think about listening more and asking questions that will elicit a conversation and go back and forth. Everyone has their own style, their own way of doing this. And that's also something that I can't necessarily predict based on who your teammate is going to be, but some may be a little bit more reserved and listening, and others may be a little bit more chatty. So use that to your advantage, use that to the advantage of the program you're visiting. You can always reflect upon that as you have finished a site visit and consider how you may want to do it differently the next time. So the exit interview is probably one of the most important meetings that you're going to have during the site visit. And it is the time when likely you are meeting with one or two faculty members. It could be a larger group. It could include a dean or some other decision makers, but it doesn't necessarily have to. Some programs actually have a couple of exit interviews, one that's a little more informal, and then one that is a little bit more formal, maybe with a dean or somebody like that. So we'll just see, you just will see what that looks like when you get your site visit schedule and in discussions with the site. But this is where you're actually telling the program what they're going to see in their report. And as I said before, no surprises. So you will be praising them and telling them what they're doing well. Many of the teams will talk about each of the principles and what they saw and found in that principle. That's one way to structure it. So that's up to you, exactly how you want to do it. But it's probably a 30-minute or so conversation, depending on if questions or other comments made. But you are saying, we think you could improve how some of your SLOs are written because they are not as clear and measurable as they could be. So they know that that's something that you're going to advise them to do. You may say there are some components of your strategic plan that are not present, and we understand you're waiting for your institution to come out with their new strategic plan. So you talk about that. You could say we notice, that you are always at, not only do you have full loads, but then you also have full overloads, and you've told us that that's too much. And within this context, we are going to suggest that there is a new faculty line that's created. So you're telling them what you're going to say in the report. This is more information about how to write that report. So we have a template. And all of the information, including the self-study, is going to be in a online folder. And so the report itself is going to be a writable document that you can work on as you begin your preparation for the visit, in fact. So you could write notes in that document and begin to organize and reorganize them into the sections that are located in each principle in the report. If that's not comfortable for you, you can do it separately on your own laptop in whatever way works for you. Or you can write handwritten notes, of course, that you are then transcribing into sentences that you write into the report. But of course, the nice thing is that both you and your teammate can work on the report at the same time, and it's not disruptive like you're not sending drafts back and forth per se. It's all just on the cloud. So each principle has a summary comments section. And so within some of the principles have multiple parts. So you will have to say a sentence or two about each of those parts, but you're talking in general about what the program is doing and how it's going. And then as you get into the other sections for each principle, you're talking about what areas of need they have. So what is maybe not as sharp and great, or could be potentially out of compliance with the principle. And from those areas of need, you may write action items. And those are items that have to be responded to. So we're not talking yet about compliance or not compliance in those words. We're talking about demonstration of information or a change in some of the presented information such that in your estimation that will show compliance with the principle. And I can definitely help you with the wording of those just because it's very important that that's consistent across programs. And also, you may have some recommendations for the program. So these are things that are sort of nice to have, or relationships that they ought to pursue, or the students wanted X, Y, or Z, and you might consider providing that to them. So that is what the report looks like per each principal. This second bullet here, there is a checklist on each of the principles that used to talk about compliance, and we changed the language to reflect more of the submission of articles to journals about how much revision do you need. So there may be principles where, quote, no revisions are needed. Some, minor revisions might be needed, major revisions might be needed. That will be dependent upon how much the program might need to submit in their rejoinder related to that principle. And honestly, this is a very subjective little box. It doesn't translate into any particular ruling or decision by the Board of Commissioners, but it is giving kind of an overview heads up to the program that this principle, really, there's nothing said here that I need to respond to, but other principles, it may be that they need definitely to respond to some heavy duty stuff, and others, it may be minor stuff that they might need to respond to. So I do read all of the reports and help with the editing. And I want you, of course, to focus on the content because you were there and you know what happened. And then as yet another sort of outsider, I might make some connections that you didn't make, but I also might make a wrong conclusion. And I will ask you, of course, while I'm reviewing it, how I'm doing, whether it's capturing what it should capture and is clear to the program so that they know what to do and how to respond. I do want these reports as quickly as you can have them. Some teams really work quickly with their reports because they start them earlier, but I do want it within a couple of weeks. If you are the chair of the visit, which would only be if you were seasoned at this, you are in charge of that report coming to me. So even if you've divided the tasks between yourself and your partner, you are ultimately responsible for the submission of the report. So I don't want to say that, the other partner can just ignore everything and foist it on you. Of course, that's not really fair, but you are, you're the one that is asking for clarifying information. Let's say if I ask for that, you're kind of, you're ultimately the one responsible for what that report looks like. So once you are done with the site visit, it's pretty intense. You're kind of on for a couple of days. You will be submitting receipts to me. So take pictures of them or capture them on your phone. There's an expense report for you to fill out that I provide to you, of course. You would include your honorarium on this. I had forgotten to mention this so far, but when you are the site team chair, you will receive $300 a day to go on this visit, total of $600. And if you're the other site team member, you will receive $200 a day or $400. So it's a nominal sort of thank you for putting out the time and effort to go on the visit. But you include that on your expense report, and then this may include travel, like driving to and from your home airport. So you would need to provide me with a map that just shows the route. And you should submit the shortest route, even if that's not the route that you take. And any receipts you have for parking, for baggage, if you checked a bag, for any meals that weren't covered directly by the program, or if it's, of course, a flat fees situation, then you'll be getting that reimbursement directly from COSMA. So all of this comes through COSMA. You do not get reimbursed through the program. But you should have that very quickly. I try to turn that around extremely quickly so that you get that money back and you get paid for doing this. You also have the opportunity to evaluate your team member. So I want to know, especially if this is your first visit, how did it go? And what do you think could be improved? Certainly, I'm tweaking it and trying to improve it, prove it all the time. So I want you to tell me about that. It's just a Google form. But also I want to know if the team was not a great fit with each other, or if there is someone who isn't quite doing the job as has been expected. Then once the report has been submitted, then you should get rid of any documents that if you printed them, you would, get rid of them, recycle them, trash them. I will take away your access to any online folder, but I do wait until that report is finished. And that just in general, you should maintain confidentiality around what happened in the visit, and you're not chatting with all of your friends at the next conference about XYZ program and how great / terrible they are. So please don't do that. And then, basically your job is done. You do not have contact with that program. That is now up to me and the Board of Commissioners. We are reaching the end of this, I promise. There are some better practices, of course, that I have noticed over the years. And I think I've pretty much said all of these over the course of this discussion, but always divide and conquer to the best of your abilities. I do encourage starting to write that report, take notes in it at the get-go. If that's not how you work best, though, do it that way. Do remember that this is an external facing report where I am not going to allow it to go out if it's unclear or if it has mistakes. So I really use a fine-tooth comb and make it consistent and do all kinds of things. And if I'm going to make any change, I check with you to make sure that it's all correct. So that's very important. We do have a kind of a sample site visit report that's been kind of deleted of all of its identifying information. And you certainly can use that if you want to read what a good report is, or a thorough report. And I think that's a word that I like to use when describing the report that you submit, that it's thorough, it's detail oriented, and that it's clear as to what the feedback is that you're providing the program and what they need to do in their submission. All right, that's the end of my lecture. Sometimes people feel a little anxious once we've gotten through this, but I would like to open this up to discussion amongst all of the individuals who are here today. If you have any questions, I'm still recording, so if you don't have any questions, I'll stop the recording, but otherwise, any thoughts or comments? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.